All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Hopefully, this is a nice, informative webinar. The topic is building smarter CTI workflows with MCP servers. I know the MCP servers is one of those topics that has been discussed a lot, and maybe some people have really gotten into it and they really understand them and to a deep level, and other people are probably like, I'm not sure what an MCP server is. So hopefully, we'll address some of those questions and enlighten you on some use cases that you can use MCP servers for. Dave is going to be taking us through all this. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with Dave. Dave is one of our staff TI advisors. Dave also has a lot of product responsibility, including on the MCP server. So a lot of deep research and helping to build this thing out. So great to have Dave. Dave, just for the sake of having people here, can you just do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sounds good. Name's Dave Johnson. I've been at Feedly for about 3 years, coming up on three. Used to be a Feedly customer. Before that, I was with the federal government. I was with the FBI for a while, and private sector. So I have a mix of experience over about 15 years of CTI experience, and that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So we like to do two finish the sentence questions real quick, Dave. So as we're in the middle of holiday season for a lot of people, what is the tradition that I most look forward to around holidays is?
Oh man. I have really lame traditions. Sleeping is like my tradition. Whenever I have like a break, like I try to prioritize getting tons of sleep and yeah, a little self-care and I got two young kids, so it's kind of making new traditions, board games and that type of stuff.
Awesome. Uh, I like the excitement of my kids opening presents. That's the
Cool.
tradition. It's the thing I look forward to and they get all excited. So, all right, and then one more question. So the thing that I discovered about MCP servers that was most surprising was,
Oh man. I think just how much untapped potential there is. I think that's the biggest thing. I think it can be an intimidating topic. There's a lot out there, and it's like sifting through all the noise and figuring out like what's useful to you. But yeah, so it's like untapped potential, I think.
awesome. There was a question about which board games. Somebody is a big board game nerd. Woody is.
Okay. Uh, there's one that I want to get into, and I actually used AI to build a computerized version of it. It's so nerdy, right? It's so bad. It's Kill Dr. Lucky. So if you're familiar with Clue, where you're trying to figure out who did the murder and stuff, this is like pre-murder. This is like people actively trying to kill this guy called Dr. Lucky, and it's a fun game. I played it like 20 years ago.
Boy,
Um,
Dave, for a second there, I thought you were going to tell me that you made your family do purple teaming exercises on.
well, that's day two. Come on. Uh, yeah, I'm not that bad. I only talk about the CTI stuff with people like you. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We'll do a little housekeeping. Before I go on, one of the things that we encourage you is to ask questions. We do that through the Q&A function. So if you have a question, please put it in there. If there's relevance to the entire audience, we'll try to answer it live so you can hear a verbal answer directly from Dave. If it's something that we can answer in the background, maybe it's just a question about a fact or something, we'll answer that in just a typed answer and put it right in the Q&A. At the end of this, we will have this recording shipped out to everybody who registered. So in your email tomorrow, you'll get a copy of the replay as well as any Q&A. We'll give you a link to all that stuff. So just so those of you are curious. One quick promo from the marketing guy about Feedly before we get started. So for those of you that aren't too familiar with Feedly, we are not just a RSS reader. We've evolved into a threat intelligence company over the last several years. And the reason that we think that we are unique and different is we collect more data from more sources. So lots of open source trusted sources. We narrow those down to the things that we think are the most relevant. We have AI processing, so we take all the articles, we read them, we scan them, we use what we call AI models. This is something that exists before ChatGPT, but they look through these and they pull out the different entities. So the TTPs, the CVEs, the threat actors, all that stuff, and they're not just looking for a particular keyword. They're actually using machine learning models that help identify things. So it'll look for a description that sounds like a TTP, not just a TTP number, for instance. We put all that stuff into our real-time threat graph. So our threat graph correlates all this data, and that allows us to have these deep relationships and context and be able to connect the different, threat actors to the cyber attacks and to the different techniques that they've used, et cetera. And then all that information can be accessed through what we call Intel agents. So Intel agents are the way that we collect data. Some of you might have, it still says AI feeds on here, but AI feeds have, some of those have evolved have evolved into agents. We also have Ask AI, which is our LLM that's built into all parts of Feedly. So you can query articles, you can query groups of articles, you can query the AI, the dashboards or the view dashboards are now AI, are now Intel agents. So I'm messing that up a little bit. But we also have it built into our report builder, into automated newsletter, but basically allowing people to use AI to enhance the summarization, to pull out details, to create crafted reports and briefs and things that you can ship out to your stakeholders. So with that, oh, and then the last one, of course, we have lots of integrations with different tools, whether that's pre-built no-code type of integrations or it's through the API that you can connect. All this data is available through Stix 2.1, and we have an MCP server that Dave's going to talk about today. So with that, I'll pass it back off to Dave. If you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, just add the question in the Q&A. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. All right, you're going to be hearing from me quite a bit. I'll try to break it up and actually let Sean maybe interject with some questions from the crowd. Um, and this is me putting this together. This presentation is like kind of a culmination of weeks of experimentation, if not months. I built a couple MCP servers. I'll explain what MCP is in a little bit, but just want to like kind of ground things. Um, So I guess like the best way to describe me is like I'm aggressively lazy. Like I want to automate stuff as much as possible. And I think MCP is the answer to a lot of things I wish I had as an analyst. I was an analyst 3+ years ago, and this kind of capability is pretty cutting edge. There's a lot of hype, right? There's a ton of news on AI this, AI that. Sometimes I want to turn off LinkedIn just because it's just too much. But I think MCP is something that really is going to kind of be part of the future of how CTI operates. And what it is basically is a way to talk to different tools using natural language, using an LLM as sort of a co-pilot. So instead of completely automating a workflow where you have one tool connected to another tool, MCP is able to figure out how to talk to different tools and then translate that into basically a server that has code on it that your LLM can interact with. So you might have an MCP server for different functions. You can have an MCP server for gathering context. Like Feedly, I think the way we designed our MCP server is to do research and to get context. And that's our strength, is really to dissect OSINT reporting and get and kind of uncover things through research. And so MCP server is really just a way to extend APIs. It's a higher level abstraction, so you don't have to code stuff once you have an MCP server set. It allows you to talk to different tools without using code. And it's very flexible. So you can see in this graph, that I've got, different tools kind of connected to each other. So this is sort of like a very shortened Intel cycle, if you're familiar with that. Basically, you're discovering data, discovering content, you're asking questions, initial research, and then MCP servers for CTI use cases. A lot of them are for enrichment, and so you'll be able to pivot from an initial data point, get a result back, manually review that, and then figure out what other tools make sense to use. So it's not something that is intended to be completely autonomous in my perspective. I think the human still has a lot of value being in the loop. So one of the things that I think gets people confused is when to not use MCP and when to use it. And I think for requests for information, RFIs, ad hoc research, investigations, it's really good. Or if you're just kind of learning about a topic, you can take your priority intelligence requirements and use MCP to get a sense of, what's happening right now. And the nice thing, not to plug Feedly too much, but is really one of the most unique MCP servers out there in that it marries real-time data with context. And you really don't get the same type of depth of information from different tools. So it's really good at that discovery angle. And then once you have sort of like that formulated, then you can pivot. You can look at IoCs, you can look at infrastructure, you can look at service banners on Shodan. So there's a lot of potential here. So this graphic is really just high level. So I try to break it down into like discovery and then pivoting, investigations, what's connected to what. And this is where your brain kicks in and you can figure out connections. And then you can act. And this is where you can share this with your team in Slack or MS Teams. You can send an email. These are all MCP servers that you can use. Gmail has an MCP server. I haven't tested it with Outlook, but I'm sure there's something like that out there. Is there any questions so far from the group?
No, not specifically. There was one question whether we'd be talking about N8N, but I don't.
Nathan, yeah, Nathan is great. I did not test SOAR tools, so this is security automation and orchestration. Um, and the reason I didn't is because I just don't have a robust environment with all those playbooks right now. But I think hooking MCP servers to an automation framework or a tool like Nathan or Tines or something like that can be really powerful. So this is just a quick summary of the ones that I used for this particular webinar. I've used lots of different ones. In order to get ready for this webinar, I spent probably 2 weeks on and off playing with the different tools and learned a lot of pitfalls in playing with them too. I thought I knew a lot about MCP before the webinar, but I sure did learn quite a bit from just getting ready for this one. So there's always lots of different ways to find MCP servers. The best place I could think of is really GitHub. There's some marketplaces on GitHub, or there's like a repository of those. So these are the ones that I used. And a note about OpenCTI. One of the things in this slide, you can see that I've got OpenCTI as a way to act on information. Maybe you can push a report to OpenCTI. Initially, the MCP server for OpenCTI is read only, but I ended up extending it and trying to make it be able to do write operations and update operations. So you'll see kind of the things I did there. As of now, you can only use it as a pivoting point. So, checking OpenCTI as another data repo. Filigran, the company behind OpenCTI, is going to update it, and you'll be able to do more write operations soon, hopefully. I did want to acknowledge one particular MCP server. So if you're gonna like take this presentation and figure out like what works for you, this is a great tool. It's completely free. It's MCP-Threat Intel. You can get it. It's the second from the bottom here. And I use this because it actually had a bunch of tools built in. It has gray noise to look at IP, to classify IPs for reputation, abuse IPDB, malware bazaar. So there's a lot of different tools hooked up to this one. And so it's a really like quick win if you want to get up and running and kind of do like a triage workflow for some IOCs.
Hey Dave, one question. When you were looking at
Mhm.
those tools and stuff, do you do a security assessment on them, or would you recommend that if people were
Yeah.
building?
I'm so glad you asked because that is a natural lead into this slide.
Okay.
So before you go out and download whatever MCP tooling, so the title of this webinar is to like make smarter workflows, and to be smart about it, you honestly just can't plug in or download whatever MCP tool, host it locally, and assume you're all good. There's a lot of risk involved with MCP because you are susceptible to prompt injection. So there's the tools can be coded in a way that are sloppy and misconfigured. So there's a few different scanners out there. There's one called MCP scan, but in just looking at this, there's a few of those different tools, and they'll let you know that there's maybe some misconfigurations in how the MCP server is structured. If it's susceptible to prompt injection, I think ramping is another one. That's where the MCP server gets updated to be less secure so that you assume that you're okay at first, but then if you update it, you'll actually be subjected to more attacks potentially. And the thing is, if you are connecting MCP to your internal tooling, your internal data, your chat history, then that's a perfect recipe for data exfil. So that's a great question. That is one of my pro tips for using MCP. Do inspect the source code. If you have a chance, take a look at the source code. The list of functions for the MCP server is usually found somewhere. It's pretty easy to find, and you'll see what all the different tools do. But look at signals from the community. How many stars does it have? Do your peers reference it? Like, look at some of that social signaling to make sure that MCP server is good. And yeah, and use tools like this. Find a tool that you feel comfortable with. This is going to be part of your workflow, like you're going to use MCP, and verify that the tooling is good. And also, I think using officially supported MCP servers is preferable at all costs. And that's something that the development team, they know their features in the future. They know what they're going to support later, what they're going to drop. And so building workflows around MCP off an alternative server can be a little bit risky in that regard. Other things too. So I use Claude. I did not use ChatGPT. That's just a disclaimer. I did not have the time or access to the tool, different tools in order to test MCP. But in Claude, you can use something called projects, and projects help sort of like contain a particular task or related tasks together. And so you could use a project and give the LLM instructions on how to use the tools better to give it organizational context and maybe some of your tech stack potentially, things that you don't want to repeat in chat a whole bunch of times. So projects can be very good. Another thing I noticed in using MCP was that it's very easy to overload your context window. So when you're chatting with the LLM, every in your chat, all the tool definitions from MCP are carried over into context. So that if you enable all of your MCP servers at once, it will trim down your context to something completely unbearable. You'll be maybe able to answer or ask one question and get a response before the conversation compacts and you lose context. So only enable MCP servers as you use them and then disable them when you don't need them anymore. Same thing with extended thinking that uses a lot of tokens, a lot of context. I think those are the biggest things so far. I think we got someone with a raised hand. I don't know if we want to answer this right now, but
Dave, I just asked them to see if they can do something in the chat in the Q&A if possible.
okay.
I did have another question. Is there any or what suggested steps would you take to harden MCP servers other than social signals or source code review?
I mean, um, the risks are really on how like the logic and the way the tools are put together. And I think the best thing is to use a tool like this that will kind of break down the different problems, the MCP scan tool or an alternative. I think that's the best thing to do. Otherwise, you'll have to probably do a minimal source code review. And also using third-party MCP servers is a little bit riskier inherently. If you use an official one, that's something that the company supports. That should be better, but it's harder to verify. You can also go overboard and do everything in a sandbox system. But whenever I used to do presentations to the public at the FBI, I always would say like, "Oh, do your banking from a VM," and no one knows how to set up a VM. There's always more paranoid things that you can do. So it really, I think the most practical thing is to use a scanner like this, honestly. Oh, no, Sean, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, this is kind of one of my own just questions. When MCP servers get added to, let's just say Claude, and they're part of what you can access, is there any like vetting or any like rigorous approval process before something can be considered an official integrated,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a great question. I don't know the answer, honestly.
Oh,
I'd have to research it. But yeah, I think there is some cursory review, but I don't know how in depth it is.
okay. There was one more question. How do you enable or disable MCP servers within a project? Oh, or is this part of what you're going to demo?
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to do a live demo because I actually ran out of context in my Claude instance because I was playing around with this too much. I took some screenshots, and the way you enable them is usually within connectors. Let me just check really quick. Um, if you go to your organizational, like you go to your account settings, you'll find connectors. And then under connectors, you'll see a whole list of them. And usually the ones that the community puts forth on GitHub, they're going to be local development ones. Feedly is a custom one that we host externally. So some MCP servers you host on your own computer, it's still a server. You're still like hosting code that your client talks to, the chat interface talks to. That could be local, or you can have it completely remote. So, and actually like creating an MCP server is a little bit of a different conversation that maybe we could do a separate webinar on. Creating them and coding them. There's actually a Claude skill. I don't know if people have seen this, but if you go into settings and capabilities, you'll see a skills area towards the bottom. And in that one, you'll see example skills. And there you'll actually see MCP builder as a skill. So unless you really like coding by hand, LLM assisted coding for MCP makes a lot of sense, honestly, because Claude knows how to talk with itself. It knows the protocol pretty well.
Dave,
So
Dave, you're still
yeah.
showing the slides if you were trying to show something else.
Um, no, I don't intend to show
Okay.
the
All right.
Claude chat window. Yeah. Um, yeah, so like building MCP servers, like the interface changes all the time in Claude. If you want to enable it, usually you hit the plus button in a new chat, and then you can choose your connectors, and then that's how you can pick it. But yeah, this is kind of like best practices for MCP rather than how to set up MCP from scratch. And along with that theme, you know, if you have no idea how to create MCP servers and you want to get started, you could use that skill in Claude to actually try making an MCP server. So maybe for your vulnerability scanner, you want to look at that. I think there is one already, but you can pick whatever tool you'd like. And sometimes coding it yourself can make you a little bit more assured that the what the MCP server is doing is safer. Um, yeah, so
It was another question here. It's
mhm.
kind of like a, um, and I don't know how to say this word, but I'm considering installing Olama. Is that how you use it?
Yeah, Olama
Okay,
for yeah.
and then using RAG to feed it documents for reference. Is that kind of the same thing as an MCP server without setting up additional servers?
You can set up um, an interface. Yeah, so you can set up like an MCP server to perform search for document retrieval. And um, I don't know if Olama itself supports MCP. I don't know if it does yet. But for people who don't know, Olama is like a local LLM. So you could do local inference on your machine without using a commercial service. I'm not sure about all of their the MCP server support yet, though. But yeah, potentially you could use local retrieval and fit that into an MCP server.
Okay.
All right. And in doing this presentation and getting ready for it, I was actually pretty underwhelmed at some of the MCP servers out there. I got really excited about OpenCTI, for example, and one of my buddies I used to work with, Josh, who might be on this call, actually, he was kept asking me like, "Oh, what MCP server should I use for OpenCTI?" And I found out all of them only support read operations only, and just lookups. And I was like, "Oh man, there's so much potential here." So, in using Claude Code, probably within 10 minutes, had a working repository of creation, CRUD tools for creating relationships, creating entities in OpenCTI. And I just took the existing MCP server, opened up the repo in Claude Code, and then basically vibe coded these additional connections. So it's not that hard if you have a little bit of familiarity with programming. And then I just run it locally. And now I'm able to create CTI reports and host them in OpenCTI. So, I mean, it's how easy it is. Like, don't be afraid. We have all the tools out there in order to kind of push you towards kind of tinkering with this stuff. So, if you don't see something quite aligned with what's good for you, you can build it. And here's the example. I just ran this earlier today. I had it do a bunch of research on React to Shell. And when you're searching for something that is really hitting the news, sometimes when you do research on it, you can overflood or flood the context window. So we're bringing in all these articles, and then basically the only thing I could do in the session was to create this report. So that's why another best practice is maybe to use separate chats in order to have fresh context for every single task that you're doing. That can be a best practice. And I think this will get better over time. You can see here that from my 10-minute vibe code session, I was able to push this threat actor here in OpenCTI. I created a sticks bundle and it actually associated piece of malware, the threat actor, and the vulnerability together. So it linked them together in the threat graph there. And I might actually build on that and share that with the public too. So if you're interested, we can kind of share that in the future as like a free gift. So what I want to do next is sort of like take a different perspective. So I talked about best practices and how to use MCP, but then let's walk through some real examples. So I wanted to cover three examples. The first one is on active exploitation. So this is something that I came across all the time as an analyst. There's something that hits the news. It could be React to Shell, for example, and you want to know who's weaponizing it. How big is this vulnerability? Let's look on the internet and see how many exposed targets there are that are susceptible to this. Maybe we inspect service banners using Shodan or something like that. Back in the day, doing this manually would be terrible. It would be, by the time you're in the middle of analysis, you're already being pinged by your boss or someone else, another stakeholder, on what the updates are. And so I think MCP is great for uh, quick RFIs that you need to do, quick research, and it can be very comprehensive. So for this one, I wanted to show some of the more interesting things, like using Shodan, for example. So maybe you discovered this vulnerability with Feedly. You looked at the trending vulnerabilities or the past 7 days. That's actually a really simple API call in Feedly. And then you find React to Shell. And then you ask the question, how many systems on the internet are vulnerable to the CVE? And you can see the thought process as it goes through. It actually knows, I tell it to use Shodan here in parentheses. You don't have to do this. The LLM should be able to actually figure out what tool to use. But I like to push it a little bit. So this is like figuring out different examples of how to use MCP in practice, I think can really open people's eyes. So it was really cool. I've never done it. Like in Shodan, I always have to look up the search commands in order to look for whatever it is. And it's always different depending on what I'm searching for. And I actually really didn't have a good idea of how to search for React. And it actually created the query, a pretty decent one. You can even like open up these toggles here and see how it thought through that process. Also, like connected to this, I wanted to get any active IOCs from exploits against this vulnerability. So this is within the same chat, and this shows basically how to scrub for IOCs through the reporting. So it looked through active cyber attacks with Feedly. It looked at the articles that were connected to those attacks, and then it started putting together the IP addresses. So I think that's really cool. But once you have IPs and you're scraping them from reporting, then what do you do with them? Do you plug them directly into your tip yet? And I would like to do a reputation check against the IPs and any of the IOCs. And then here you can use that free tool I mentioned that does a bunch of different checks at once. And it actually did reputation checks across, I think, 4 or 5 different tools. And then it gave me like a confidence score. It was in abuse IPDB. Is actively tracked by gray noise. So you're getting a lot of good signals. And just imagine doing this by hand back in the day. I think even, yeah, I even had it check OpenCTI. So it was pretty easy. I don't have OpenCTI with a lot of data here, as I knew it would not find anything, but it's still cool that it was able to check that. So that is sort of like I think one of the coolest practical, real day-to-day use cases for MCP is like you got that immediate ask, you got that RFI that's burning from a stakeholder, and you need to do the research. And you can go beyond just looking at internet reports. You can actually use something like Shodan and reputation checks in order to like really vet the data.
So Dave, let me ask you a dumb question from the marketing guy here. Um, so why not just use Claude or ChatGPT? Like, tell me, like, did you analyze some of the results? The results better
Oh
sourced?
yeah, you're completely without these MCP tools. You're getting basically, if you use Claude, you could probably just turn on web search and you'll get very superficial results, basically. Like, think of like Google top 10 results. And, nine times out of 10, that's not enough. You're going to need to go deeper. And, even like talking to closed systems like Shodan, for example, Gray Noise, and tapping into their databases. You can't do that from just a web search. And Feedly too, like we organize everything through a threat graph. Like all of our information is enriched and connected to each other. And so you're getting like a deeper context with us versus superficial data.
All right, here's a real practical question here. What are the anticipated costs for implementing the suggested steps? Are there ways to optimize to do local versus cloud-based analysis?
The cost for doing local, like Olama versus using something like Claude for this research, is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the person's thinking about how do I set this up? And, is there a
Yeah.
way that I'm not like constantly paying using all my LLM tokens? Is there a
Oh,
way to
okay.
like make it a little bit more cost effective?
Yeah. So I think if you're experimenting, focus on the free tools. So this threat intel one is a great free tool to use. It combines a bunch of, you can sign up for free API keys and get that set up pretty simply. Shodan, I mean that's not free, but it's super cheap. Like every Black Friday, you can get like access for $5, I think. I think they have lifetime memberships too that are pretty cheap and come out. But you don't need to pay for a whole bunch of services. You can get by on these free tools quite easily. Um, for the context for the tokens, there are strategies like only enabling MCP tools as you need them, and that will prevent the LLM, the context from being flooded by all the tool definitions. Because how does it know what tool to call on in MCP? It actually has that basically in its memory, and it knows that like you can call on these tools. So that eats into that context window, and I think the best thing to do is, you're going to be checking thread intel or Feedly. You enable those MCP servers for that leg of the chat. Another thing to do too is to change the style preferences for your chat. So the default is super irritating for me. So I don't know about other people, but like when you talk to Claude, it not only tries to answer the question, it tries to do extra credit and maybe draw you something like creates a React component and tries to, I'm like, no, just answer the question. And I turn on concise as a style preference. And I try to treat it like an analyst. Like, do not give me everything you know. Just answer the question with enough detail. And so you can set that up in your system preferences for your account. And then also per chat, you can change the style to concise. And that I felt really helped. And I actually love that. And actually, like that's something I noticed in the field when you talk to analysts that are super smart, the really smart ones, they know how to simplify things in less words. But the ones that might be compensating a little bit, they try to talk a lot. So I like concise answers quite a bit, and I think that'll save money, save token usage.
Okay, that was good. Good. Thanks for all those guidance. A couple comments. Woody said this is really great for researching emerging threats before a lot of available OSINT information is out there. Somebody else
Right.
said you could try Census. Census has an AI tool, but sometimes there are errors in the intelligence. Census is it's a paid vendor tool. And then the last question was, have we attempted to link MCP to any sort of sentinel, specifically advanced threat hunting, to send emails to a distribution list that has a cyber team for any hits to investigate?
That's definitely, I think, one of the first things I really wanted to play with, but unfortunately, I just don't have access to that tooling. But I think as far as workflows go, tracking emerging threats, especially vulnerabilities, MCP is great. You'll get lots of signals that rapidly change, and you can just ask on demand. You can tap into those real-time tools like Feedly or Shodan. I think that's great for that. And then threat hunting is very human in the middle if it's done right. And so I think you're going to really do a lot of that research, pivoting, person in the middle, LLM co-pilot. And then once you're all solid with your investigation, then you can push that into a ticketing system or push it into a detection. Pushing LLM stuff without a human straight into a detection pipeline is a little bit risky. I did research on this a couple of years ago, and it wasn't really great then. I still don't think it's that great. You always need to like test it first. So um, I think MCP is great for threat hunting workflows as long as you have a smart analyst who's interpreting results and yeah.
All right, Dave, I'll let you. I got some good feedback on that answer about the costs and how you connected things together. So thanks. I want you to continue on.
Awesome. Yeah, so in this one, it's just another case of very like PIR driven requirement. Maybe you're tracking ransomware, you're at a banking institution or financial firm. Ransomware is huge. It's been huge for really long time. I'm almost like tired of ransomware. It's always ransomware. But MCP is great for doing research on it, pivoting, figuring out infrastructure, connecting it to threat actors. And Feedly is a really good first point for this discovery path. And then you're basically using the same tools for the same type of work. So like threat intel, this MCP server I mentioned that has a whole bunch of tools together. You can scrub your IOCs against that, get sort of like your own confidence score on those IOCs, and then you can pass it into a report or you can pass it into maybe your tip. So here's some highlights from this example that I played with in Claude. So I tried to basically pull the IOCs from Feedly, and Feedly is cool because we're pulling stuff real time. It's not like you have to wait and this is like 3 weeks old. No, it's like within 7 minutes or so. We're pulling all the content from the internet. And you can see the IOCs, and then we're connecting that. You can see how Feedly is the first tool, and then it connects to this threat intel one in order to scrub the IOCs. So just like think about deconstructing your typical playbook for CTI. So you always have to like kind of check the source quality and that type of stuff. And the threat intel MCP server is really good for that. You can see how it kind of formats things. Some best practices I think are you tell the LLM how to format your tools, what columns to use, and you can even put this into the project instructions. You can tell it exactly how to format tables when it uses certain tools and that type of thing. And I think something that I haven't really like as an analyst, you have limited time. So you're really like trying to make connections and you're focusing on really trying to find the golden nuggets. And sometimes you just focus on good enough. And then you put the report together and you ship it out. But with MCP, you're able to kind of chase things that you wouldn't have time to do normally. So one of the coolest things I think was using Shodan in order to enumerate hosting infrastructure for C2 servers. So if you've got threat actors who are doing data exfil, maybe they're hosting tools on a command and control server, you can actually figure out maybe some common elements between all of their infrastructure. And this is something that would take a long time. Back in the day, it would be like taking you know, butcher paper, spreading it on the ground, and then drawing like link connections and things between different nodes. Now you can use MCP to kind of play with it and see if it leads anywhere. So I think this is with Akira, and I think this is looking for sonic wall related stuff. And then the cool thing is like it enumerated all the infrastructure patterns for the C2s, and then it told me kind of what it thought of what the threat actor was doing in its infrastructure. So, it's using different providers and why it gives the context. It knows a little bit more about why certain pieces of infrastructure are set up a certain way. So it's like really good at like providing some hypotheses for you. But again, it's great to have a human in the loop, and then you could always question things. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting for that example. And the next thing is a little bit more basic, I think, for MCP. It's doing just basic triage and validation of IOCs. So you'll see threat intel again. I kind of like using that with Shodan. It's so much fun. If you already have IOCs from Feedly, you can do the same thing again. And the cool thing is you can even push this into OpenCTI, or you could use OpenCTI as a checking point. So threat intel platforms, I think, are great for pivoting, enrichment, but you can also push data to threat intel platforms. And I think this will be more supported in the future.
What about visualizations like timelines, mind maps, or other?
Yeah, honestly, it's not great yet. I actually did build an MCP server for my FlowViz tool. I don't know if anyone on the call knows about FlowViz, but I've got this tool that's open source. And Sean's laughing because I'm bringing it up. But
No, no.
I,
There's also a webinar that Dave did on the FlowViz tool, which is
yeah,
something that's freely available. I'll post a link to it in the chat.
yeah, and you can make it create fancy visualizations, but they're not standardized. The thing that you can do is train a skill, create a skill for Claude to create visualizations consistently. So like there's a skill for creating MCP servers. You can create a skill to create visuals to your preference. Maybe you have brand guidelines and things like that. So you can do that right in here. You can create an HTML file. You can create a React component. I think this will change quite a bit and it'll be a lot easier to share and create better visuals over time. Yeah, and so this is me again, just playing with Shodan and looking at C2 infrastructure. I just kind of fell in love with this part of it. We already talked about it. And now I can see that I'm asking it to create a report in OpenCTI with the indicators. So this is actually something that I did. I vibe coded the extended MCP server for OpenCTI yesterday. And then I just created the report using the extended functions. And it was a lot of fun. Like you could see, like it's actually creating it. And then you could use a tip to help visualize things too. And so you don't have to do it in the chat. You can use the link node diagrams in the tip to help visualize things too. And that's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Dave, here's a question. Were there any instances where the results or responses were off the mark in the threat intel human feedback review?
Yeah, so I've been taught to not trust things unless I can go and verify it myself. I'd
You,
have to
you and everyone
verify.
else on this call probably,
Yeah,
just
100%. And there's things like, especially with the Shodan results, at first I was like, oh, I don't think that's right. We can't just have 1,000 different, here, I'll even show it to you. I'll try to find it quick. hmm Yeah, here we go. I saw it get to this point, or it said, based on my Shodan searches, I found 1,600 total systems running React and Next.js, and I know that is not true. But then, maybe because I was using Opus or something, it actually hedged it a bit and then gave me a much more nuanced answer. So then I thought, okay, but still there's always like that underlying uncertainty. So I think it's really good for pointing you in the right direction, but I wouldn't stake your career on everything MCP server does. So yeah, I would definitely like verify that. And I think it'll be better over time. Um,
Dave, there's a question of clarification. What Claude are you using it? Claude Desktop, Claude Code, Claude what?
Desktop.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, I would have loved to do a live demo, but unfortunately, I am tapped out on all my token allotment or my sessions. So
Yeah, somebody
that's
suggested
unfortunate.
asking for references so that the analyst can check the work of whatever you
Yeah,
do.
you can have it do that, and yeah, I think that's hard to do when data is aggregated and kind of massaged a little bit. Once it's normalized and detached from the original source, sometimes you lose the original citation. So that's something that we're getting better at. We do whenever Feedly does pull stuff from an article, we try to maintain the citations to the article, but sometimes it gets massaged a little bit, and that's something that we're working on improving too.
Dave, I don't know if you showed Slack earlier or something, but there was a question, what is the use case, how you were tying into Slack?
Yeah. So I think it's more of things that maybe you have a vulnerability team that's detached from your CTI team and you need to send a notification. So uh, one of the most realistic use cases I can think of is using Slack. Maybe you have a template for how to do a Slack communication. You put that in your instructions in Claude in a project or something, so you don't have to repeat it all the time. And then you tell it to send this data to Slack, to the ops team, or to the whatever team. So usually it's like when you have those kind of like hard points where you have to share it with another group in your company. I think that helps quite a bit.
Dave, did you have any sources when you were trying to get up to speed on what MCP servers were and how somebody had asked for, if we had any things we'd like to point them to say, there's a great beginner's guide to MCP server or, introductory guide.
Yeah, I think I did a video on this and it's hosted somewhere on our website. It's one of I think, let's see here.
Oh, is it,
CP.
you mean part of the launch of MCP server?
It's one of
Oh,
the videos. But then also there's a site called modelcontextprotocol.io. And
oh,
actually, like, this is like the first thing I saw when I was learning about it, and it kind of made sense. So, it said is think of MS or MCP like a USB-C port for AI applications. So it's just a standard way to connect different systems together. So it does a good job running through this. So this is a really good source, I think.
okay. Model context protocol.io.
Mhm. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thanks to everyone so much. There was a couple of suggestions for you, Dave, afterwards. Like you can write up, like some additional guidance. So, an idea for TI Essentials article, perhaps. Uh, no, I think that's it. And really, really appreciate it. Uh, all right. One more question. All right. One more question came in. Then I'm
Good.
cutting it off. Have you tried incorporating a quality control model within the prompts you use or strict formatting for your prompts?
Uh, no, I have not. I'm curious about that though.
Okay.
Uh, Yeah, that's a really good, yeah, like prompt quality is definitely something that can impact how MCP servers are used. Yeah, it's a really good point.
All right. Well, a lot of good positive comments in the feedback here, helpful insights, etc. So thanks, Dave, so much. We will, as I said earlier, we will put the recording, we'll put the Q&A, we'll put a couple of references, we'll put the slides all into a Notion doc, and we'll share that publicly, as well as a link directly to the video. That'll come in your email tomorrow. So with that, I'll close the webinar. Thanks so much.
All right. Yeah, thank you, everyone.